You know, joy to the world is a phrase that we hear a lot this year. But a lot of people aren't really feeling it right now. This time of year can be emotionally difficult on many people for many different reasons. And then this past year, we've had natural disasters, we've had divisions within our country, we've had violence at a level that maybe we haven't seen before. How can there possibly be any joy right now? And then something comes along to remind us. And for me this year, it was the book of joy. And it was very interesting because I had more than 2 ministers mention this book to me in the past 2 weeks. I said, I need to look at this book. And this book, the Book of Joy, is a recording of and a commentary about a week where His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, they met in Dharamsala, India, to celebrate the Dalai Lama's 80th birthday, and then they dialogued about this idea of joy. The back cover of the book reminds us that His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu have survived more than 50 years of exile, and they have faced the most soul-crushing violence of oppression that we could imagine. But despite their hardships, and really they say because of them, they are 2 of the most joyful people on this planet. Would you not agree? The Dalai Lama's smile, we just know, right? You just feel his joy. By the end of the week that they spent together, which was a week filled with laughter and with tears, these 2 global heroes, they had stared into this despair of our times, and they told us how, nevertheless, we could live a life overflowing with joy. Nevertheless. So maybe we might learn something from their wisdom. Do you think? Maybe listen a little bit? The Dalai Lama said, "One great question underlies our existence. What is the purpose of life? After much consideration," he said, "I believe the purpose of life is," before I finish, I'm going to digress just for a moment. Because one of the things we do here is we explore the power of purpose pretty often. And as part of that, we've talked about our individual purpose for being here on this planet. Does anybody remember what we said? You just throw it out. Oh, come on, you've been listening, I know. All right, I'll remind you. Our purpose is to express God in the highest and best way we can in our own unique and perfect way.
Right.
Right? Okay. Remember now?
Yeah.
All right. Good. I don't feel like I have to. I've been really ineffective. But what's interesting and stimulating is that everyone has different ideas about purpose, and the Dalai Lama has his. And so, do you want to know what his purpose is? What he thinks the purpose is? You ready? Okay. Good. So I'm going to start over and read his complete sentence. His complete statement. One great question, he said, underlies our existence. What is the purpose of life? After much consideration, I believe the purpose of life is to find happiness. It does not matter, he goes on, whether one is a Buddhist like me or a Christian like the Archbishop or any other religion or no religion at all. From the moment of birth, every human being wants to discover happiness. No differences, he says, in our culture or our education or our religion affect this. From the very core of our being, we simply desire joy and contentment. But so often these feelings are fleeting and hard to find, like a butterfly that lands on us and flutters away. The ultimate source of happiness is within us. not money, not power, this is still the Dalai Lama, not status. Outward attainment will not bring inner joyfulness. We must look inside, he said. Sadly, many of the things that undermine our joy and happiness we create ourselves. Often it comes from the negative tendencies of the mind, emotional reactivity, or from our inability to appreciate and utilize the resources that exist within us. The suffering from natural disasters we cannot control, but the suffering from our daily disasters we can. We create most of our suffering, so it should be logical that we also have the ability to create more joy. It simply depends on the attitudes, the perspectives, and the reactions we bring to situations and to our relationships with other people. When it comes to personal happiness, there is a lot that we as individuals can do. It sounds like maybe what you've heard in New Thought churches. Similar to what Ernest Holmes said in Richard Living. Richard Holmes is the founder of the Science of Mind. He wrote, "Our mental attitudes are our most priceless possessions. No material security is actually secure, but the deep issues of our thought can make or unmake us." And that's very much in line with what His Holiness the Dalai Lama said. And as we go forward, I really want to make the distinction that this doesn't mean if you have suffered a significant loss in your life, if you are grieving, this does not mean you don't feel that and do the appropriate work around that, whatever. But there is still underneath that. You can still do that, and you should still do that. But underneath, there is this place of joy, of happiness, that we can still touch, that is always there waiting for you. So I'm going to take 3 ideas from that long quote I read and dig into it a little bit this morning. So the 3 ideas that I pulled out are, number 1, the ultimate source of happiness or joy is within us. Number 2, we so often undermine our own joy and happiness. Number 3, conversely, we can create joy and happiness. So the first idea, the ultimate source of happiness or joy, and we're using those words as the same today. Sometimes we separate them, but the ultimate source of happiness or joy is within us. In that statement of His Holiness, the word source isn't capitalized, but I would capitalize it. The source of happiness or joy is within us with a capital S, because we're referring to the source of all. We're referring to God as source. We're referring to all that is. That is where our happiness and our joy, real, lasting, ultimate happiness comes from. It's inside of us, from our connection to Spirit. Ernest Holmes suggests that we say to ourselves, I am joy, peace, and happiness. I am, which is the name of God in you. I am the spirit of joy within me. I radiate life. I am life. There is one life, and that life is my life now. And in that sense, we capitalize the L for life, again referring to God. And the word now is a very important piece of that affirmation from Ernest Holmes. By placing it in present tense, that statement, it affirms our own personal connection with Spirit, with Source. It's not that we are becoming life, like it's a future thing, but we are now the life of God. That's what animates our very being. For our purposes today, we could change the wording a little bit. We could say, we are not becoming joy. We are now in and of joy. that element that is God. And the reason that statement, and when I read that statement, I am the spirit of joy, I am joy and peace. Did anybody, did that kind of ring true for you? There's a power in that statement because it's declaring the truth of your being. And we know it when we hear the truth. We know it at our core. These are the only kinds of affirmations or statements of being that work. Something that states what is already so at the level of your soul. So the statement, I am joy, peace, and happiness. I am the spirit of joy within me. I radiate life. I am life. There is one life, and that life is my life now. It's the truth of who you are. And if we get that, if we really understand it at our core, I am joy, I am life, it's done. We're there. But we don't always get it. And that goes to the second point we're going to explore this morning. That is that we so often undermine our own happiness. Specifically, the Dalai Lama said, sadly, many of the things that undermine our joy and happiness, we create ourselves. Often it comes from the negative tendencies of the mind, emotional reactivity, or from our inability to appreciate and utilize the resources that exist within us. You know, there's a lot of places to go with that statement. But I went to Brene Brown, if you're familiar with her, and in her book, Daring Greatly, she has a lot to say about how we push away our joy with the negative habits of our minds, the way we sometimes react emotionally, and the way we don't really appreciate what we already have. She calls it foreboding joy, or the paradoxical dread that clamps down on us when we feel moments of joy. And here's how it goes. See if you recognize any of these. You are realizing how much you love your partner, and then you are suddenly overwhelmed with fear that your partner will leave you. Or you are feeling how good life is right now, and then you envision your life taking a really wrong turn down a dark alley because, it's happened before. Or you're really loving your job, but you're suddenly paralyzed when you think that in this economy, it won't be long until you're laid off. Or the doctor tells you that your cancer went into remission. And after a moment of relief, a wave floods over you that the doctor's wrong. And the cancer's still there, he just didn't see it. Or you're standing over your baby's crib, feeling overwhelmed with love. And then visions of something terrible happening to her fill your mind. We are part of a spiritual teaching that says that since we are expressions of the infinite creator, we are creative beings. And the way we create is through our thoughts and our feelings. And because we are part of a spiritual community that teaches that, we might not want to admit that we do any of those things. I was still making sure my kid was breathing at the third child. I thought I'd be done after. No. But we don't want to admit that we do that because, maybe it's not in line with the teachings. But we do it. We do it. That's what the research shows we as human beings do. It's natural. So, given this teaching, why on earth do we do it? According to Brene Brown, the answer is pretty straightforward. She says, deep, sweet joy bubbling up in us makes us very vulnerable to being hurt should it go away. We don't like to be vulnerable, do we? So we kind of protect ourselves, just in case. It's like, if I don't allow myself to feel this joy, I won't get hurt when I think I'm going to lose it. We slap on this fear of losing it so we don't feel that vulnerability. And what we do, though, is we shut down the feeling of joy that we had. We're not experiencing it at all. Maybe we had that glimmer, but I say I want it. I want joy. I feel vulnerable. So because we don't want to be hurt, we practice being devastated or be disappointed so that when the real thing happens, it won't hurt so much. Anybody relate? You don't have to raise your hand. There's one. A man in his early 60s in Brene Brown's study, he said this: I used to think the best way to go through life was to expect the worst. That way, if it happened, you were prepared. Then I was in a car accident and my wife was killed. Needless to say, expecting the worst didn't prepare me at all. And worse, I still grieve for all those wonderful moments my wife and I shared that I didn't fully enjoy. My commitment to her memory is to fully enjoy every moment now. I just wish she was here now that I know how to do that. So how do we do that? How do we fully enjoy every moment now when the natural tendencies of our brain is to not let us? Well, that's our final idea from the Dalai Lama's original quote for us to look at this morning. The idea that we can create joy and happiness. Remember, he said, we create most of our suffering. So it should be logical that we also have the ability to create more joy. It simply depends on the attitudes, the perspectives, and the reactions we bring to situations and to our relationships with other people. So according to Brene Brown's research, we all have this phenomenon of blocking joy. We all have it in our brains going on. But those who live joy-filled lives, they have it, but they use it as a reminder rather than a warning. They see it coming. They experience it for a moment, they notice, but then they switch. They see the fear blocking their joy, and they adopt a different attitude. They take another perspective, or they employ a different reaction. For them, the shudder of vulnerability that comes with that deep feeling of joy, the vulnerability that that joy will be taken away, for them it's an invitation to practice gratitude, to acknowledge how truly grateful they are for the person, the beauty, the connection, or simply the moment right now, this moment before them. So gratitude emerged from the data, Brene Brown's data, as the antidote to the natural tendency we have to derailing our joy. In fact, every participant in Brene Brown's study who spoke about the ability to stay open to joy also talked about the importance of gratitude. Brene Brown learned most about gratitude practices and the relation they have to joy from men and women who had experienced some of the most profound losses or survived the greatest traumas. These included parents whose children had died, family members with terminally ill loved ones, and people who had survived genocide or extreme trauma. Their unified wisdom was this: be grateful for what you have. Don't take what you have for granted. Celebrate it. Don't apologize for what you have. Be grateful for it and share your gratitude with others. When you honor what you have, you're honoring what I've lost. So we honor people with deep losses when we are grateful for what we have. We hear so much about gratitude as a spiritual practice, but there's some significant brain research behind the power of gratitude. particularly as it relates to an antidote to fear, which is really what we're doing when we slam down joy. We're afraid we're going to lose it. So fear lives in the amygdala, that lizard brain that's trying to keep us safe, you know. And every time we feel fear, we're in this frontal brain. But if we think of two things we're grateful for in this moment, like the fresh air on my face, my shoes are comfortable, I'm so glad. That takes us out of the amygdala and into another part of the brain. So we literally cannot feel fear and gratitude at the same time. So it's science. So it's not just a nice spiritual practice, it's actually a power to take you away from the fear-based egoic mind to that awareness of God, where we are ultimately connected to God, and we know that we know that we know that all is well. Ernest Holmes says, if we wish to come to the Spirit for the healing of our wounds, let us come in peace and with spontaneous joy, for the Spirit is joy. Let us come with thanksgiving also, for a thankful heart is in harmony with life. So that leads us to a question, and it's the question I'm going to pose in the next couple weeks, because we're going to continue this series with different joy practices for a couple weeks. What would your life look like today, tomorrow, this month, next year, if you knew that you were here to experience greater and greater and even greater joy? What would your life be like if you knew this power of joy in you? It's just going to expand exponentially. What do you feel in your body as we sense that, as we think of that? What might you do differently as you move out into this world? And we can begin to answer that question by using one of the practices from the Book of Joy called morning intention setting. We can start doing this right now, and then maybe you might want to do it at home. Setting an intention is like setting your goal for the day. It's what you wish for yourself, and it will always, if it's a worthy intention, a worthy goal, they might say, it's always going to be something that benefits others as well. It could be something like, may I be an instrument of peace today. That statement blesses you and it blesses everyone you come in contact with. So would it be okay if we do a little practice of it right now? You want to try it? Okay. So I'm going to invite you to sit comfortably in your chair with your feet on the ground. This is something you could do while still lying in bed before getting up and the rush of the day begins. You can rest your hands on your legs or on your belly, and if you're comfortable to close your eyes, please do so. Take several long breaths through your nose. Sense or feel your stomach rise and fall with the breath. Let's go into that peaceful place. Now, ask yourself, what is my heart's desire? What do I wish for myself, for my loved ones, and for the world? Don't try to fill it in with your brain. Just allow it to come up, because our deepest desires lie beyond our temporary wishes and wants. They usually involve living with the most profound human values like peace and love. That's what leads to our greatest happiness. That's what calls us back to our place within the fabric of life. A way to test our intentions is it just for me or for others? Is it for the benefit of the few or for the many? Is it for now or for the future? So I invite you to ask yourself again, what is my heart's desire? What do I wish for myself, for my loved ones, and for the world? It might be deepest joy, profound love, happiness. Just allow that to come into your awareness, whatever it might be. Then, in this moment, silent to yourself and at home. This way, it might state your intention. It might be today, may I greet everyone with the love that is in my heart. Or today, may I be less judgmental. Or today, may I be patient and loving with my children. It can be specific, or it can be general. So to yourself, state your intention now. My intention for myself, loved ones, the world is, may I be. I'm going to close with the traditional loving kindness prayer, which is in itself an intention. You may open your eyes if you'd like, or leave them closed, whatever's comfortable. May all beings attain happiness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings never be separated from joy. May all beings abide in peace. And don't forget, all beings includes you. Namaste.
Namaste.